Episode 9. Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow. Introducing Phil Dale on the BTS Creative Academy Podcast. With me, your host, Martin Colton. Gonna join me on the clap?
Yeah.
1, 2, 3. Nice. That's the link in the video. We're on video, by the way, Phil. And
are we?
And we are on sound. Yes. Seen
are we video and sound?
Seen and heard.
Okay.
Yeah. So Phil Dale, good morning.
Morning.
How are you?
Yeah, I'm very good. Actually. Yeah.
Good. What's happening in your life right now, Phil?
I am in the process of casting Panto for this Christmas. We're producing Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs down in Stroud in Gloucestershire. 3rd year there, having done Beauty and the Beast in 21, and then we did Cinderella in 22, and we're doing Snow White. And I had auditions last Thursday, and literally last night I have sent out offer emails to the Snow White I'd like to cast and the Wicked Queen that I would like to cast. So actually
You're
on
right
tenterhooks.
in the middle of it.
I'm waiting for the agents to come back and hopefully say, yes, very pleased.
And
like to do it.
And rejections as well, or
I'm waiting. We did interesting insight into, how tough this industry is. Mm-hmm. It's a 4-week contract down in Stroud for a Panto that we're offering. Put a call out. We're looking for I've cast 3 of the main principal parts, looking for a Snow White and a Wicked Queen. We put out a call on Spotlight for a Snow White, 4-week contract over Christmas, £500 a week. So it's all right money. It's
kind of industry standard.
Yeah, it's
would you say?
kind of industry standard. 490 applications for Snow White.
Wow.
490 thumbnail headshots back from agents on Spotlight. So just goes to show how difficult it is.
A 1 in 500 chance.
Absolutely.
Of
to
getting
start
the
with,
job.
right
To start,
outset,
just to get seen.
Yeah.
And so, what does the beginning of that process look like to you when you receive those 500 applicants?
Oh. No, it is fun, but that first stage is quite daunting. And I think we had 500. I think the official figure 489 for Snow White, about 360 for the Wicked Queen. Mm-hmm. Wicked Queen I put out as a playing age of sort of between 30 and 45. So I was looking for a sort of a slightly older female as well. We put it out for both male or female, but I have ended up casting a female in the role of the Wicked Queen. But the Snow White put it out as a playing age of sort of 18 to 22. Mm-hmm. And 490 come back in. There's always a nagging feeling because on Spotlight you get the choice. You can go through the thumbnails and you can click on it, and then you can look at their CV and whatever, and they might have show reels on there.
Yeah, and that's a big task, isn't it? To look through that many
if you
people.
Think 500, and you can see why people use casting agents. Do you know what I mean? Because that's a job in itself. Mm-hmm. My daughter Lucy, who currently is living with us at the moment because she's pregnant, but and she's buying a house in Bishop Stortford with her partner, but she's living with me, and she has worked as a caster before, so she was able to help out with the whole sorting out process.
Mm-hmm. And this isn't new to you, is it?
No, it's not. No. But interestingly enough, later in my career, newer from the point of view of going out and casting professionally all the time. Do you know what I mean? Because as you probably know from experience, when I was doing bigger productions in Harlow and Stortford and the Panto, it was very, very much community based. Mm-hmm. So we did tend to cast principally very much from the local community.
Yeah,
do you know what I mean?
And you'd have some connection to most of the people.
Yeah, we would have some sort of connection. Mm-hmm. We would run auditions, but we would often have a pretty clear idea of who we were thinking of for any given part. We certainly weren't in a situation where we were getting 500 applications via via email. Do you know what I mean? So from that point of view, slightly different process. But the interesting thing is, like with the Snow White thing, and it just goes to show how difficult this industry is that, I mean, to start with, when you're looking at 500 photographs, you've just got to go through a process to get it down to some sort of manageable amount.
Yes, of course.
So, I mean, literally with this one, we were like, okay, so it's Snow White. Well, let's just get rid of everyone who's blonde. You know,
okay.
Save us having to darken their hair or wear a wig.
Because you've got that opportunity. You can do
so
that.
many.
Yeah.
So literally, we lost 200 people.
So
on hair colour alone, but that had nothing to do with how good they were.
With talent, yeah. So that's an important message for if an actor was listening
absolutely.
or watching, that the talent and them as a person isn't necessarily the choice that's being made.
No. Certainly not in the
early stages.
In the first instance. So you get down to about 250. You then go for a process of actually looking at them and seeing what do they look like physically. What's their show reel like? Can they sing? What sort of experience have they got? I think from there we got down to, I think I put out 40 requests for self-tapes, and self-tapes is a fairly new thing in the industry, because obviously there's now the technology for people to be able to, you know, video themselves and whatever. And self-tapes is a godsend, because the ability to be able to send out something show specific and say, you know, here's Snow White's intro, here's her song, can you do this? So you send out 40 requests for self-tapes, and I think we got 30 odd back. And then you're looking at 30 videos of potential performers doing the actual opening from the show and singing the song from the show. And there's also something, you know, when you write your own panto scripts, there's some kind of egotistical sort of lovely to see your own work coming back to you being recorded by people. 30 self-tapes. From that, we picked 10. 11 actually. We went out 11 requests. One girl dropped out because she was ill, and we saw 10 people last Thursday in an actual audition environment, and then made the choice from there. So.
So, having been an actor, I've done a lot of self-tapes over the last. They've become huge. They've become the main industry way to audition people, to get that initial "Are you right for the role?" I've come across tons of advice of what you have to do within a self-tape. You have to be on a blue screen behind you. You have to present yourself introduce yourself in this way. Having been you're on the other side of that. Have you got any advice for an actor that say this is how you get the attention? I
think. I mean, record it in a plain, straightforward environment. I mean, you don't have to be behind a blue screen. You don't have to be on a green screen. You know,
a neutral environment.
A neutral environment. I've seen plenty of self-tapes, you know, recorded clearly in a room where there's a, you know, set of double doors behind, which is a wardrobe. It's not an issue. Do you know what I mean? That's if that's the space that you've got. Sound quality is really important. Do you know what I mean? Like just make sure it would be worth investing in a half decent microphone. You know, anything from like an iPhone 9 and above is going to give you a good enough quality video. But occasionally, particularly if it's obviously song based, I've had some come back where the sound quality is really poor, but the majority are fine. So make sure the sound quality is all right. Make sure it's a fairly neutral environment. I think the most important thing, follow the instructions. Do what you've been asked to do, and don't try and do anything clever. Because that's all you want to see. You know, if I wanted you to be clever, if I said, you know, I might send out a self-tape and go, you know, busk the opening of an intro to the audience because I want to see if anybody's any good at that. But if I send you a script, just do the script. We had one self-tape come back, which is a good example. This guy sent this self-tape back, and it was for Muddles. In the end, I've cast it a different way, so we didn't need to cast it that way around. But I put out a request for a self-tape for the part of Muddles in Panto, and it was just a block of script. It was an introduction to the audience, a chat to the audience, block of script, and had this self-tape come back. And this guy comes out and he starts to deliver the script on tape, and he's fairly competent, fairly good. and then he stops halfway through, and he starts doing this kind of mock panto sort of idea of looking off stage and going, "Hey, Barry, did you write this? Oh, this is not even fun." And then literally starts to kind of take
it somewhere else.
Take it somewhere else. Take the rise out of the script. Feel the need to go, look at me. Aren't I so great at busking and coming up with ideas? And literally the whole thing just disintegrated in front of my eyes. And all I was left with was thinking, you're a wild card, mate. I'm anywhere near you. Do you know what I mean?
I haven't got time for this.
I just haven't got time. I haven't got time for it. Just do. And I just tend to find that, you do the request and it comes back and it's there, and then because at that stage all you're looking to do is go, is it worth bringing you in to see? So I would say, keep it neutral environment, follow the instructions, do what's requested, and don't try and just don't try and be clever. Do you know what I mean? Just literally don't try and be clever, because you have no idea. You can try and be clever in a live environment. Because if you're in an audition room and you're in a live environment, you can sense it. Do you know what I mean? You can say something, whatever.
But the self-tape isn't for that, is it? The self-tape...
Trying to be clever on a self-tape.
No, the self-tape is to get you in the room.
You have no idea what that reaction's going to... You know what I mean? You can easily do something. All of the ones that we chose, straight down the line, because all you're doing is going... It's like a photo, isn't it? It's like they always say about headshots. Your headshot should be you. But don't lie about your height, and don't put in a headshot that's 10 years out of date. Because actually, I'm thinking this is who you are. And then when you turn up and you're 10 years older than your headshot, you're not done yourself any favours.
It's a waste of time for everybody, isn't it?
If you're only 5 foot, don't say you're 5'2", because actually I might want you to be 5 foot. So that whole thing about, I want to be a little bit taller, or I'm not quite as good looking, or whatever, don't. Same thing with the self-tape. Don't try and
be something you're not.
Different. So
I guess you've got to find a place of being your most genuine self in front of that camera for that moment.
Yeah, absolutely.
And follow the instruction.
Yeah. Follow the instruction.
Follow the instruction. That's really simple. Really simple advice, isn't it?
Yeah.
Follow the instructions.
And as long as I said, whenever I send out, I try and be really clear. We send out, backing traps. We send out guide vocals, and we just try and go, this is all we want you to do. And as I said, it's a fun process. I enjoy it, and it's exciting to sort of see a team come together. Do you know what I mean? And it's really interesting. We did Cinderella last year, and cast a girl called Millie who came down and worked with us. She's now she's in Tokyo now in Disney. But that it's a new relationship you've made. It's somebody new that you've now worked with in the business, and I just find it really interesting when I look back at my emails and look through when we were sending out the self-tape requests for her, and at that point, I didn't know her, and I didn't know she was going to be the one that ends up getting cast, and then
you built a relationship.
Built a relationship, and there's somebody new to work with within the industry, and those relationships carry on into the future. So
that is the beautiful thing with this stuff, isn't it? The relationships and the connections that build. They're very unique and special, aren't they, within this industry?
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. I think. You get relationships in all kinds of work environments, don't you? But I think there's something about performers and people within this industry. That's, I suppose, to a certain extent. What is it? You're there to perform and entertain, aren't you? So I suppose those relationships should feel slightly more vibrant than the.
But why?
Ones. Why do they feel?
Why do they feel bigger than in the normal everyday? Working
because they are, to a certain extent, because they're bigger, because you end up working with these people in an environment that's heightened, isn't it? Do you know what I mean? You end up
it's not quite the real world, is it?
No. It's not quite. That's not the real world. It's not the real world. We're all just trying to escape the real world, aren't we?
Exactly.
That's what we're trying to do. So
you've got these people in through the self tape.
Yeah.
What happens next then? They come into into the room with you?
Well, you sit down. You've then got the process of going through the self tapes. So you've gone from 500 to 250 by just going. You don't look right. You've gone from 250 down to 40 self tape requests. That's the real hard work stage. Do you know what I mean? When you're looking at everyone, and that's when I find myself worrying. You can click yes, no, maybe on the profile, and there's always a part of me that worries that am I turfing out the best performer I've ever had, or is this like a Pete Best in the Beatles moment or whatever? Do you know what I mean? Where you're going to throw out the wrong person, but you just have to have faith, and that you will find you'll find what you need. So you go through that process. Down to 30 self-tape requests, 40 odd self-tape requests, send those out. Most of them come back very quickly. Most of them are online. Sometimes they send files through, but most of the time.
Here's a good question then. Is it good to say, if there's a deadline date, does it make any difference at all if they send it straight away or leave it to the end of the deadline? Because that's another piece of advice I've been thrown at me a few times.
Good question. Don't think it makes any difference. Don't think it makes any difference. I think that there's a tendency to remember the first one that comes back, but you might remember it for the wrong reasons, because the first one that comes back might be an absolute stinker. Do you know what I mean? So I'm thinking now about who we've just. I mean, interestingly, the girl that I've offered the part of the Wicked Queen to, it was very much just in the mix. I think the self-tape came back sort of midway through, and she wasn't top of my list. It was a classic example of just do what is required.
It's just a solid tape.
Because it was a good, solid tape. It didn't kind of reach out and go, I've got to cast this person, but it certainly said this person's worth seeing. And then as soon as she was in the room, different thing altogether. Do you know what I mean? Just sparked up, and I was like, she's the one I want. So I think just don't rush it out, get it done. I mean, talking about rushing stuff out, this is one of the things that's really interesting. Is I have this bit of a running joke now that when I post a casting call on Spotlight. I literally I'll press the button, and then this time I started my stopwatch to see how fast it would be before the first agent returned a client.
Right.
And it's nearly always less than 60 seconds.
Wow.
And you're like,
how are they on it?
But you haven't even read. You can't have read.
They must have just seen female.
Do you know what I mean? And I always that to a certain extent makes me go. Those people often don't get seen because you just immediately go.
You don't.
You haven't. You can't. There's no way could you. I've just sat down. And I've written out a description of where we're playing, where the production is, what kind of role I'm looking for, what requirements I want. I've sent it out, and you've gone, me. So that thing, I think take a breather and read the actual brief before you reply and go, either please see my client or see me.
Yeah.
But certainly with the self tape thing, just. Do it. Take your time, get it done, and then get it back within the deadline. Where I had so many that came back after the deadline. Yeah, and you've done the whole shortlisting.
You're already in the process of making choices at that point, aren't you? Yeah.
So if it comes in 4 or 5 days late, then
no point.
Chances are it's not going to happen.
Yeah.
But
tell me more about being in the room with you as choosing. You've got these 30 people here to choose. One of them is Snow White.
Oh, in the actual
audition room. What does that look like?
10. We had 10.
So you bring 10 in. So you whittled the 500 odd down to 30, down to
30. 10. I think 40 self-tape requests, 30 self-tape requests. We saw 25 self-tapes, 30 self-tapes, and then we saw 10 in a room. I'm a really big fan in the audition stage. I like to see people as a group. I bring them in as a group, and I run an audition where they're all there for about 2.5 hours. And I know a lot of people don't do that. I know a lot of people don't agree with that, but I'm a big believer in one, when you're putting a production together and you're going to work as a team, you want team players. And the best way to find out whether or not you've got team players is just have everybody in the room and work as a team. And what I tend to do, because for like Snow White, we had a dance audition, so we had all 10 girls in the room at once, and we did a dance audition together. We then played a few games, just bog standard drama games, because I just think it lightens it up a bit and it makes the whole day a bit more fun. But also, it's just that thing about seeing how people react and just checking that you haven't got any prima donnas who think they're above all that kind of thing. Do you know what I mean? And just ensuring that's the case. But then also, what I then did was we wanted the Snow Whites to do the standard intro, the sort of hello boys and girls, that kind of thing. So I did that in the room, and they all saw each other do that. And then the ones that weren't doing it were the audience, and I asked them to behave like the audience, so they were doing the hellos and whatever. And then we move them out and bring them in one at a time to see them singing and do some one-on-one work. But I just think that it's fairer for performers if they get to see the whole process. And also, I think it makes more sense from a casting point of view if you then don't get cast. It kind of maybe gives you some sort of insight into what you were up against.
Why would some people say that is a bad way to do it?
I don't know. Maybe they don't feel confident doing it that way around, or maybe they do think that because one of the sort of the old-fashioned way to do auditions is you give people a time slot, don't you? Do you know what I mean? And you bring them in. And I just think from a performer's point of view, if you do get brought into that environment and you just next and you go on and you sing a bit of song and you do a bit of script and you go and you don't ever really interact with anybody else, or you don't see anybody else, and then you don't get offered the part, it's a bit like being just dropped through a black hole. Do you know what I mean? You have no reference point. Whereas I think if you were in the room and you saw everybody else, it just makes it all a bit more understandable. Yeah, and I think people maybe go away and understand what they're up against and maybe if they don't get it, why they didn't get it. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, so there's an opportunity for them to reflect and work on stuff, perhaps.
I think it's an opportunity for performers to reflect, and I also think just as importantly, I find I just want to make sure that I get a team that it's not just about what they do on stage, because especially, with Panto, you've got a group of people that are going to live together for 3 weeks in a rented accommodation environment. You get the wrong one in there, and you can do way more damage to a production than having a rank average performer on stage. You know what I mean? You can wreck the whole thing if you get the wrong people.
One bad apple.
Yeah. So you just got to make sure that you've got a team that works.
Do you think you can see that within a 2.5 hour time slot? What the person is? Get a good feel of the person.
You can get an idea.
Yeah.
You get an idea of how. Of course, you can't be right, can you? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah,
but I think you can certainly have an idea of what they're like as a team player and how they come across and just what they're like as a person. Because I think that's it's just really important.
So that's just as important as the talent itself.
Yeah, absolutely.
And
but also, I mean, to a certain extent, from a Panto point of view, there is that it's a slightly unreal, theatrical kind of environment. It's from the point of view you want performers that not only look right and feel right, but that they're engaging. Do you know what I mean? And that sometimes doesn't just come across in their performance. That comes across in the whole way that they interact with everybody else. Because if they can interact with your group well, there's a sense that interaction will, fall off the stage and be sensed by the audience as well. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. So if you want someone who feels quite fun, then just play some games and do some fun stuff with them, and you'll get an idea.
Yeah, that's really quite interesting. It's really interesting to hear your point of view, your take on it from your your position.
Yeah.
From sitting back there and choosing these individuals.
I think the thing is that the thing to realise, and I say it to people, is that it's just not, it's really difficult to not take any kind of rejection to heart when you go to audition for something, but it's not personal. Do you know what I mean? It's not. I mean, I literally, with the Wicked Queen, we had seven women come in and audition for the Wicked Queen, and at the end, I said to them, I could cast every single one of you. That wouldn't be a lie. Do you know what I mean? Could have cast every single one of them. They were all good enough to do it. They could all hold a song. They were all quite captivating, So I'm spoilt for choice, and 6 of those are gonna, have gone through quite a lengthy process. That because that would have been 3 weeks previous that they probably first saw the process, what I mean? And then they got offered up for it, and then they had a self-tape request, and then they did the self-tape, and then they sent that off, and then they got an email saying, yes, we'd like to see you, and then they travelled all the way down to Harlow to get there, and then they spent 2.5 hours in an audition process, and then they left, and then they get an email saying, thanks a lot, but no. Yeah. And they've done it all off their own back, and they've gone to expense for it. It's tough.
Yeah, no, it is a tough expense. At no point through the audition process does an actor get paid for any of this.
No.
It is a job. It is a job application. It is an audition process. There's a lot of talk in the industry at the moment about changing the way rejection is handled within the industry. From an actor's point of view, a lot of actors will audition for stuff and never hear. Yeah, they'll go through that 3 weeks. Yeah. And then just nothing.
Yeah. No, I reply to, once they get to self-tape stage, I will reply to them all and say, thanks for the self-tape, but no. And then certainly in the audition stage, they'll get an individual response in the audition stage saying, no, sorry. And I'd be more than happy to have a chat with people about feedback if that's what they wanted. Yeah. Because that idea of just going through that whole process and then hearing nothing, and it surprises me how many, you run an audition and you go through that process and you say to them at the end, I'll be in touch, no matter what, and they go, oh, thanks. That I really appreciate that, because so many times you don't. And to think that you could actually, travel halfway down the country, spend 2.5 hours with someone and hear nothing.
Yeah, and often it's
the height of rudeness, isn't it?
There's a position of an actor is often felt like they're being left dangling.
Yeah,
like they don't know whether they can continue to make plans for other things, whether they can go to the next audition, because I just did this big thing that took 3 weeks. I really want it.
Yeah, that's the one I want.
Yeah,
but I haven't heard anything.
If I audition for this and get that, then that's going to muck up my chances of what I worked on. So that is a really good thing to do. To say thank you, but no thank you. A little bit of communication isn't hard, especially for those people in the end stage. It's too hard to do to all the self tapes and all the applications, but once the work's being put in, I would say that's a nice thing to do. Nice and professional.
Yeah, absolutely. Treat others as you would hope to be treated yourself, isn't it?
Exactly.
Fairly straightforward.
Yeah, because there's no other walk of life where that would be acceptable, is it?
No, I don't. I suppose. Yeah, you couldn't imagine. Oh, I don't know. Could you? I can say you wouldn't expect to go to a job interview and not be told you hadn't got it, would you? Do you know what I mean? If you go for a job interview, then you get a letter saying thanks, but no thanks, don't you? If you haven't got it. But
one of the things that I've found hard over the years is auditioning children and saying no to the parents. Yeah, and occasionally getting a cross parent as like, my child is fantastic. How can you not see how good Tommy is?
It's interesting actually, because we did open auditions for the child, the children chorus parts in Panto this year for the first time, and I've got a lot of experience of doing open auditions for child parts from productions in the past. But when we picked up the contract in Stroud, initially, I went to a local dance school and they provided the chorus, and I didn't get involved in the audition process at all. And the first year, the dance school provided the kids and we sent them the choreography and they did it. It worked perfectly, no problem at all. Second year, really good. But we're building down in Stroud, and I wanted more boys. So I said to the dance school this year, I'd like to run open auditions. And of course, and I said, and I was like, this doesn't, I'm not negating your involvement in it, and I want your kids still to be involved in it, but I'd like to try and get some more boys in. And I said to them, I know from experience as well that actually if we run open auditions and we pick up a few extra people, they'll be cast in the panto, they'll do the panto, they'll enjoy it, they'll then join your dance school. It's a great way to sort of boost numbers that way around. But their initial response was really kind of negative and really wary. And then in the end they said, and I said, look, you know, if the girls that have been in it for the last 2 years turn up to audition, they're great. They're going to get in. One, I'm going to cast them because they're good dancers, but secondly, they've done 2 years. And the other thing is, it's like I said before, it's not just about how good they are on stage. You want kids that you know will turn up every single day and will deliver, and will be able to do that over a 3-week period over the Christmas time. And that requires support from parents, and that requires parents that are committed. So if you've got a kid that has done 2 pantos and has delivered every single year and then turns up for the third one, unless there's some reason, you're going to cast them again, because
that reliability
is essential.
It's huge, yeah.
So I was trying to say to the dance school, you know, don't worry about the fact that we're gonna hold open auditions, because I'm just looking, you know. But there was this initial reaction of like, oh my God, what, you know, but they, and then we went through this stage where the dance school got in touch and said, oh, we've got a real problem. Loads of the kids are saying they're not going to come. Do you know what I mean? And I was like, I then had to go down to Stroud one night to the dance school and speak to all the kids and say, look, guys, come and see it. You know, come to the auditions. It's going to be fine and whatever. But then on the actual day, my view is always, you know, you bring a whole load of kids into audition, and you audition them, and then you make cuts. Do you know what I mean? So if you start off with 60 kids and you only want 30, you might do a dance audition and then cut that 60 down to 40, and then you might cut that 40 down to the 25, 26 that you actually need. And I said to the dance school, what, you know, we'll make the second cut, and we will and we'll end up with the 26 kids that we need today. So if we end up with 30, we'll make the cut and we'll lose the 4 that we need. And they were like, do you need to do that? And I was like, well, of course I do. I mean, how are we going to get from 30 to 26 if we don't cut it? Yeah, but if we do end up with 30, shall we leave it at that today and then we'll make the cut later? Why? Because, well, you know, the idea of cutting 4 people, you know, in front of everybody just seems really cruel. Well, why is it less cruel to leave 30 and then phone 4 people up the next day and tell them they're not in it? Well, it's just a bit easier, isn't it? Who on? You. Do you know what I mean? And then you realise that it's not, you know, when people start going, oh, it's really difficult to do that, they're not actually trying to protect the person that's being cut. They're just trying to protect themselves because they don't want to come across as mean, or do you know what I mean? Or they'll feel really sorry for them. Because I was like, well, if you're going to cut 4 kids from a group of 30, then if you do it in that environment there and then, one, it's done and it's all done and dusted, and their parents are there and they can comfort them if they want to. But the idea of, like, you know, is it not more cruel to send all 30 away with hope? And then, do you know what I mean? But rejection is rejection, isn't it? Do you know what I mean? It makes no difference.
So what's the fear then that's gonna happen on that day if you send them away? I think the
fear is, I think what if you send them away, or if you don't cut it on the day?
Yeah, if you cut it on the day, what's the worst that can happen?
That's what I mean. I think their fear is that I don't know, there'll be some sort of a backlash, or the kids will get upset, or they'll start crying, or whatever. I don't know. And I've had situations where you're in auditions and kids cry or whatever when they go to leave. But ultimately speaking, that process for kids to go through is just so important. Do you know what I mean? And I mean, I've had kids that have come to 2 panto auditions and failed at the last stage, 2 years on the trot, and then come in the third and get cast. Do you know what I mean? And not given up. And I've had kids that have come to the first audition, get to the last stage, not quite make it, and then you never see them again.
Yeah.
And that's the difference.
And when you say that's important for children to have that moment of rejection, why is that?
Because it's real life, you know.
There was for a while.
Don't get me into speak that whole thing. I've done that thing about just recently going to my grandson's sports day,
where everyone wins a medal.
Where it's not really a sports day; they just play games in front of everyone. I was quite pleased actually because it started off with them all just playing games, and then they did do some running races and they gave some medals, and I was like, thank goodness, because I'm not a big fan of that new idea of like.
Well, I don't think it's.
Hey,
it's about let's
not compete.
And I think it teaches kids some dangerous lessons that we're all going to win.
Absolutely. You know, that might be the case when you.
That might be the case when you're young.
When you're at school, everybody wins. It's all the same, and then almost as if when you leave. You know,
you leave and go into the real world.
Here's a job. Everyone has this job. You just come in and that's not the way it works.
No, and I think that's potentially one of the reasons why there's a lot of sad adults out there that are not, because they're not winning anymore, and they don't get it.
They don't get it.
You know, if we're sticking with the world of like acting and auditioning, and they're doing these auditions and they're not getting them, they can't process the failure. They can't, because they didn't experience it at sports day. They didn't experience it at an audition when they were young.
They need to know what it likes to limp over the line in 8th place because you're just too slow.
And what you need to do to get into first place.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know,
or make a decision that maybe running's not your thing. Go do something else.
Yes, definitely. Because if you keep being told that you're great at this when you're not, when it's not your thing, that can lead you on a whole lifetime of.
No, they. That we were saying, weren't we? That whole. That's why I think that that kids going through that sort of audition process, getting rejected, and coming back and winning next time or whatever. But you get rejected first time and then make a decision you're never going to do it again. Fair enough. But you won't ever get cast again, clearly. But that's fair enough. If that's the decision you make, then that's okay. But the people that invariably succeed are the ones that just keep going. And then when you go back and look at what we were talking about to start with, when you're trying to get a Snow White part for a 4-week contract in a little town in Gloucestershire, and there's 500 other people all going for the same thing. It just shows you how tough it is.
And interestingly, actually, this takes me on to a new subject that I wanted to go on, is that I've known you sort of 20 odd years now. Done a little bits of community theatre with you years and years ago. Years and years ago, in a couple of like chorus parts in some of your productions. But I've always looked as you as like you are a businessman, an entrepreneur, someone that's been successful, but also I've seen your failures. Your failures have been quite open. I'm sorry for that's quite harsh to put it that way. Your failures. Your
failures have been quite open.
No, but they have.
I thought I covered them really well.
That's really harsh, isn't it? Your failures. Let's find a new way to put that. Your pitfalls.
Specifically, are you referring to?
But you've had some moments where you could have stopped. You could have gone, this is enough now, or gone, this isn't for me. But you've pushed forward and you've found new direction in your life, haven't you?
Yes.
After tough moments.
I suppose so. I mean, I suppose specifically speaking, what happened at Harlow Playhouse when I was.
Yeah, I guess I was coming up at that point, part of the Playhouse Young People's Theatre, finding out what community theatre is all about, and being a really, I was an active member within that community, and it gave me a lot, and it propelled me forward in life, being part of the Playhouse at that time. And you was a leader at that time, of the Playhouse, and then the leader was sort of taken away.
beheaded.
Yeah.
There was a difficult time. I mean, I joined the Playhouse in the late 90s as the business development manager after it had been shut for a year. I had been involved prior to its closure when I'd been involved in a few pantos and done quite a bit of amateur stuff there, and then ended up as the business development manager after the council reopened it, and then pitched for the panto and got the panto contract and produced the first panto there after it reopened in 96, I think it was. And then I think 97, 98 was about the time that I started working as a business development manager. Lawrence H came on board as the manager. He then moved up to the head of arts. I became the manager of the Playhouse, and sort of early 2000s was a really vibrant time for the Playhouse. That was when we established the theatre school there. We were producing 3-4 productions a year. You'd have a big panto, have a musical in the autumn, other productions up in the studio theatre and whatever. And it was a vibrant time. It was a vibrant time, and it was a time when a lot of people who are now working, very successfully within the industry, sort of cut their teeth on what we were doing. Mike Fenterman, who's now directing in the West End, came through that process. Dave Hearn, who was part of the company that established The Play That Goes Wrong, and obviously, took that through West End and into Broadway. Dave Hearn came through that process. Paul Smith, who's the artistic director of... and I apologise to him because I can't remember his company's name, but up north, very successful theatre company up north. He came through that process, so that it was clearly a really successful sort of period, and then it hit a brick wall, hit a fairly heavy brick wall in sort of 2007 was when I was suspended for 3 or 4 months, and then reinstated. But then it kind of broke. Do you know what I mean? It was a difficult time. It was a difficult time, and I sort of look back on it with I don't know, what do I look back on it with? Yeah, it was a tough time because it sort of everything came to a clattering halt, and then I sort of had to go through a process of rebuilding, not just that, because I then ended up as the artistic producer at the Rhodes in Bishop Stortford, and we kind of rebuilt that model of community theatre and big productions all based around a panto, and once again have now created a kind of a group of people who are now working very successfully within the industry. But not only did I have to sort of reinvent that model again, I found myself having to sort of reinvent myself in a way, because it was a tough time. But I think, you go through periods in your career when things are on and up, and you go through periods in a career when things are on a down, and to a certain extent, I feel a bit like I'm going through a third kind of cycle now, because, I worked at the 10-year, seems to be, I've got this 10-year cycle thing going on, because I was at the Playhouse for, around about 10 years at the Playhouse, for around about 10 years, from the time I first started to get involved, became business development manager, to when I left. I then spent a couple of years working in various parts of the industry. Worked for a company called Theatre Is, who were the Eastern region sort of funded theatre for young people. Then I got involved in the Rhodes, which is now South Mill Arts, and was artistic programmer there, and produced their panto. And I was there from 2010 to 2018, 2009 when I first started. So once it's sort of like 8-9 year period, and then resigned that position, lost the panto contract. COVID hit. went down again into a big kind of, sort of lull in my sort of creative journey and my creative career. And now only just now feel as if I'm coming out of it again with a slightly different model. Still got the theatre school, but now producing stuff further afield. So it's not on my doorstep. We're producing Panto down in Stroud. Got a touring production that's moving out. Maybe finally, I don't know, but finally sort of trying to be a bit bigger.
You're trying to be bigger. You're trying to grow something.
I say trying to be a bit bigger in a sort of an apologetic manner, didn't I? It's weird. I've always had this, kind of. I felt comfortable when I'm on my doorstep. I think I've always felt kind of comfortable if I'm a big fish in a little pond. That's and when as you expand, obviously you become a smaller fish in a bigger pond, and that's when your kind of imposter syndrome issues all start to kick in and whatever. So only now am I beginning to, get used to that and go, just get on and do stuff that's beyond just on your doorstep. Do you know what I mean?
So how far away is Stroud?
135 miles.
135 miles. So you're kind of dipping in and out of that community, are you?
Yeah, and it's interesting because obviously it feels different because firstly, when I first got the contract, my biggest fear was like, well, the model that I use for Panto won't work because the model that I've got for Panto was developed in Harlow and then honed in Bishop Stortford, and it's very much about creating a Panto for the local community. Do you know what I mean? So we picked up the contract in Stroud, and I was like, oh, it's 135 miles away. It won't feel the same, and it isn't the same. But the interesting thing is that the shows have been received just as well. The audiences are growing just like they did in the other places, and the young people that are involved are getting just as much out of it. But I'm sort of operating it from a remote point of view.
So that community building that you did before in your early days of theatre management directing, are you still doing the same things now then?
I think yes, without it being on my doorstep, if you see what I mean. Do you know what I mean? I know that sounds... it's not quite the same thing because... I mean, I've still got the theatre school based in Harlow and Bishop Stortford, and I'm looking forward at the moment because we do a nativity at Pet's Corner every year, and that's an opportunity to play around and do something a bit different and whatever. It's not... So what I'm doing is not on such a big scale as it was before, but it's working in different places.
So I guess you've taken some of the things that you've learnt and you're just adapting them.
Yeah.
It doesn't necessarily have to always be exactly the same.
No.
You don't have to keep repeating the same chapter.
No. It's I think the interesting thing is that one of the things. Well, I mean, one of the key differences is that for years the Pantos I produced were kind of were big. They were big amateur productions. Production standards were incredibly high, and that's what people always used to say. And we had professional set designers, professional artists working on them. But from a performance point of view, they were always they were community performers most of the time. It was only in the last few years at Bishop Stortford that I was actually paying some of the principals to be in it, and even then I wasn't paying them that much. Wasn't paying them that much money. And actually, I look back now and think that maybe that was a fault in the model because actually, if you're not working towards trying to create an environment where you're paying people proper money to do something as a career, then maybe there's an element missing to what you're doing. Because, for theatre to thrive, some people have to make a career out of it and have to make money out of it. Do you know what I mean? So the thing I'm pleased with now is the fact that we have a community chorus and we have a properly paid
So you're getting you're
cast.
kind of trying. You found a place where you're getting the best of both worlds. You're getting
and the really good thing is that 3 or 4 of those principal casts that I'm using are people that came through the process that I created. Abby Middleton is in her 3rd panto for me. Will Eden is in panto for me this year, and Will came through the theatre school and was Dodger in the Cameron Mackintosh tour of Oliver and performed in the West End and is now a professional performer, and I'm paying him, industry standard sort of money to work for me for 4 weeks, and there's something fulfilling about that. Do you know what I mean? To think
yes, definitely.
That's gone to that sort of level. So yeah, it's it's interesting. It's interesting having.
There's that line between being a professional doing it for a hobby and those same people coming together can be quite dangerous ground. Do you think? Can be quite
dangerous ground in what way?
I've seen it in the past where the professionals and the amateurs do come together, and the amateurs don't necessarily see the opportunity of working with the professionals, and the professionals might not necessarily like working with the amateurs.
Well, I suppose that could happen. Not necessarily. I don't think that doesn't apply to the panto.
So the panto's different, isn't it?
Yeah. I mean, you remind me in saying that of a production that we did of Romeo and Juliet. Are you specifically thinking of that?
It came to my mind as well as we started to go down that road. Because that was early days of chat rooms, wasn't it?
Oh, mate.
Do you remember that?
Oh my word! You've brought back a memory there.
Because that was a clash.
Were you part of that?
No. But
Were you one of those anonymous posters?
I do remember it though.
You are referring to a production that we did at the Playhouse of Romeo and Juliet. Now we had produced several productions leading up to Romeo and Juliet, and I think Romeo and Juliet was 2007. So funny enough, it's one of the last ones that I did, 2006 or 2007. But it was the autumn production, and previous to that, we'd done A Midsummer Night's Dream, which was totally community based. And Mike Fenterman directed Romeo and Juliet, and at the time was working professionally. I think he was at he'd just done 2 years at Bretton Hall, and was dipping his toes into professional work. So we kind of came up with this idea of using professional actors in the lead roles to work alongside community people. And there was a backlash to it. There was a.
Was it open? Did people know?
I think it was because I seem to remember posting a. I think it all came about because I posted a notice up for auditions, and several of the main parts in Romeo and Juliet weren't on that audition posting, and I think there was a note that said, these parts aren't available because they're being cast by professionals, and there was a kickback from a whole load of people saying, well, this is really, you've really reminded me of quite an interesting time. But also, interestingly, I got way too emotionally involved in that. That hurt me quite bad. I look back now and remember that hurt me quite bad, and the kickback against that was quite bad. And that's an interesting insight into from a personal point of view, one of my faults with regards to my career is that I used to get just too emotionally involved in stuff that should have just been dismissed. Because ultimately speaking, I should have just dismissed it. Do you know what I mean? Don't care. I'm in charge. This is the way we're going to do it. These are professionals. You'll learn from it. And the vast majority of people were more than happy to do that. I think there was a kind of a gnarly hardcore of excuse me, amdrams who were doing that kind of, an element of that bit of a prima donna response. Do you know what I mean? Who does he think he is bringing in professionally trained actors? We're perfectly capable of doing this. And I can remember, there was a chat board, wasn't there, on the Playhouse?
Yeah, like I say, early days of like chat rooms and the
Wild
internet.
West. The Wild West.
When you could say anything.
Probably before Twitter and everything.
I think it was. Yeah. I think it was in them days of you could set up a website and you could have a little box where you type some text in and put it out there.
Took off one night.
Yeah,
just took off, and there were people. And I can remember spending one night looking at all of these stuff, and they were all anonymous postings, weren't they? Course, people saying all of these things, and it hurting, and me think, and I probably typed a few. I think I was probably I was typing, not anonymous as myself,
because you felt this need to
justify. I felt a need to justify what I was doing, whereas actually there was no need. It was a perfectly I probably learned a bit about communicating an idea from that, because, maybe I should have thought that through with regards to how I communicated that out and said that we were gonna bring in professionals to work alongside to do it. But ultimately speaking, as I said, I always had a tendency. The same thing happened when I was at South Mill Arts. I would emotionally respond to criticism badly. It would hurt. It would really hurt.
Yeah, and when you care about something,
it's
hard to.
It is hard.
You're in a very privileged position to have a job that you. Yeah. I'm assuming you love this job.
Yes, at times.
So that when it's going wrong, it is going to hurt.
It does. But I do think that if asked to give advice to anybody, working in the industry from the experience I've had, one of the things I would say is learn to deflect criticism and not care about it. Because there are some people that are very, very good at doing that, and I think those that are very good at doing that maybe progress either further career-wise or certainly, look after themselves better from a mental health perspective. Because I did used to suffer quite badly from criticism, and sometimes I think maybe that was a thing that a lot of people wouldn't understand, because that maybe they have this kind of impression that I'm this sort of big gregarious kind of bouldering, doesn't care less sort of bloke, but I used to take a lot of stuff to heart, and I look back now and realise a lot of that criticism was nothing more than sour grapes from people that were just not happy that something was working.
But at the time,
I couldn't see it as that, and had I seen it as that, I think there would have been a lot of occasions where I'd have just. I know that my reaction sometimes made situations worse, because I was constantly trying to prove a point. I can remember once we did a production of Cabaret. Do you remember when we did Cabaret?
I do remember Cabaret. Yeah, Jason Thorpe.
Jason was great. Jason played the MC.
Was it Caroline?
Yeah, Caroline.
I don't remember, but I remember having a crush on her.
She played Sally Bowles. She was at the Poor School in acting school in London. I think she went through that. But yeah, I directed this production of Cabaret. I look back now, and probably one of my favourite productions, and one of the things that I'm probably most proud about, for want of a better word. I thought it was good. It was good, and I worked hard at it and whatever. But I remember it opened and it got predominantly really good feedback. But then there was some I can't remember who it was, but somebody from the local theatre community decided to I can't remember whether it was on a comment board or somehow just like wrote some scathing review of it. And I was we had the Playhouse Theatre Company newsletter at the time, and they'd written this I think they'd sent an email to the marketing manager at the Playhouse, basically slagging it off, and she showed it to me. And rather than just go, oh well, they didn't like it, I decided to try and prove some sort of a point, and then took this like email that they'd written slagging off the production and published it in the Playhouse Theatre Company newsletter alongside another review from somebody that was really good, and tried to create some sort of debate about the difference between the different opinions of things and whatever. And I look back now and go, what was I doing? Just so much energy expended
wasted
on stuff that was.
Whenever I'm talking to someone about taking on criticism, I'm always taken back to when I was involved in Jack and the Beanstalk, and I was Daisy the Cow. Do you remember Michael Fentman directed that panto? I think 2004, 2005.
Yes. Yeah.
Me and Rick Munn's Daisy the Cow.
Wow.
Remember that?
Yeah.
that was hard work. That was fun.
Yeah,
it was fun.
yeah.
It's one of them things you're like, do I want to be Daisy the Cow? And then you're it, and then you're like, actually, this is really quite enjoyable. But putting that to one side, the enjoyment of the show, I always remember a full-page spread in the Harlow Star. The review came through, and it started off with, why the hell is there a middle-aged man in a dress running round screaming at children? Why is the principal boy a girl? And this person that had wrote this big, huge review, and I mean, it was like a full-page spread, this review, this person had never seen a panto before. Didn't understand the concept of a panto.
Were they American?
No, but yeah, they were. They were. They were. Do you not remember this?
I'm just trying to think.
Yeah. They were from America or Canada or somewhere like that.
Yeah.
They'd never seen a panto, and they'd come to review this panto and torn it apart based on information that they didn't understand. They had no concept of the subject of which they were reviewing. So I often take it to a place of, when someone gives you that negative feedback, they don't necessarily know what they're talking about.
Oh, absolutely.
So the weight that you're giving it, when they gave it 1 star, well, that 1 star was based on...
Yeah, absolutely.
On their perspective.
That's very true. The idea that criticism just shouldn't be reacted to in the same way that high praise shouldn't be taken on board. Do you know what I mean? I mean, ultimately speaking, both of those things are dangerous.
Yes.
Because if you believe criticism, then you just start to cane yourself. And if you believe high praise, then you'll definitely end up thinking you're better than you actually are. I think either or.
And that high praise is interesting as well, because I've found that a place to cause a lot of stagnation in myself. If I get too much high praise, told I'm doing too good a job at something, I'll sit back and relax. I'll sit back and go, and not on purpose. You'll sit back for a moment and just go, I did that. That's dangerous.
That's the whole affirmation thing. And I've I could talk to you for a long time about the dangers of requiring affirmation for things, because affirmation has been a big part of my kind of psychological makeup and the need for some sort of affirmation. But it's very true what you say. I mean, I've been in scenarios where the slightest affirmation. I remember having a meeting with the guy that I'd put Pop Divas, the tour and concert show that I've got together, and also I'm a big fan of festivals. Used to go to Glastonbury a lot, and went to Stand and Calling quite a few times, a local one, and I can remember thinking that Pop Divas would work well at Stand and Calling on a Sunday morning or whatever. It'd be a great gig. So I got in touch with the chap and sent him some stuff, the guy that runs Stand and Calling, and sent him some stuff about Pop Divas, and he said, "Oh, come in for a meeting." And I went in for a meeting, and I went into London and met him in this office in London, and he was really kind of positive about the show and said, yeah, that would be really good, and I'm sure we could make something work here. And I can remember leaving the meeting feeling affirmed. Do you know what I mean? That he had kind of recognised my production, and that was really good. And that was 5 years ago, and Pop Divas has never appeared at Standard Calling. And the reason it hasn't is because I left that meeting waiting for him to take it further, and of course he didn't, because he's got way bigger fish to fry than whether or not I'm that bothered about doing it. I probably didn't push it any further, but I felt good about the fact that, that sort of the affirmation of just having a meeting and going, this looks right and whatever, was enough for me at the time to make me feel good about myself, and it never went any further.
Not to drive it forward.
Whereas ultimately, and then when you analyse that situation, you kind of go, yeah, that's really interesting, because that's got something to do with just requiring, just needing to feel a bit good about yourself.
Yes.
Which also ties into that whole thing about, how dangerous it is when you allow, if affirmation makes you feel good and criticism makes you feel bad, then you're doing this all the time, Whereas actually neither should have any impact, because you should just be focused on what it is you're trying to achieve.
So kind of finding some perspective on it.
Yeah.
Yeah. And taking a look at that affirmation or that negative feedback, and not going so deep on an emotional level.
Not going deep on an emotional level, not taking things to heart, and realising that, ultimately speaking, that'll make no difference, does it? Do you know what I mean?
No.
Nothing, really.
No.
We're all going to die.
Yeah. Thanks for reminding me.
One day, we're just all going to die.
Yeah.
So,
and I think you can find some freedom in that.
Yeah.
Because that's a subject that I spent a long time struggling with personally.
What, death?
Death, yeah.
Right, okay.
Yeah, it hovered over me for quite a while. My wife was very ill,
right,
for a number of years.
Yeah.
And just a constant fear of like, it's just around the corner. You don't know, could today be the day? But then at some point last year, my mind changed.
Right.
And I went, we're all going to die.
Yeah.
And let's enjoy this experience while we've got it. Let's not
the
ruin
thing.
the moment.
Yeah. I mean, I had a very difficult time I went through. My brother took his own life, when in 2016, and that was a really difficult time to go through. But that, I mean, these kind of things put perspective on things, don't they? I mean, you what do they say? What doesn't break you makes you. Do you know what I mean? And I think, I think that whole thing about there's two ways to look at. I real big believer in paradox. I think that paradox is so important. And that paradox of we're going to die. So sort of the paradox is you can either be negative about it or you can be positive about it, can't you?
Repositioning your thought process on it.
Just looking at it one of two different ways. It's either a reason to celebrate, or it's a reason to give up hope. So oh, blimey.
You're going deep now.
Where are we at?
Yeah.
So I think you've just got to. I always remember I'm of mind of Patrick Stewart as Jean-Luc Picard. Mm-hmm. There's a speech he does in a Star Trek Generations about death, and I can't remember exactly the speech, but he talks about death, and he says, I like to think of death as a companion on my shoulder, constantly reminding me to live, or something like that. And I can remember hearing that speech and him delivering it in that classic kind of I'm a better actor than nearly anybody else around sort of manner.
Yeah.
And thinking, that that makes perfect sense.
Yeah, and it kind of takes me to. It reminds me of like a few Shakespeare speeches as well.
Yes.
You know, Shakespeare has contemplated life, death,
Yes.
and the meaning of everything quite a bit.
Yes.
And
Yes.
yeah, and Macbeth.
Tomorrow and tomorrow and tomorrow. Creeps forth this petty pace to the last syllable of recorded time, and all our yesterdays have lighted fools the way to dusty death. Out, out, brief candle, life is but a walking shadow, a poor player that struts and frets his hour upon the stage and then is heard no more. It is a tale told by an idiot, full of sound and fury, and signifying nothing. I love that.
Thank you.
That's just a belter, isn't it?
Where did that come from?
That's my favourite speech out of Macbeth.
Yeah. Contemplating
that idea of like, the kind of, you can take that a number of ways. I often think that speech is about the fact that we keep going. It's a warning about that thing about going tomorrow. I'll do it tomorrow. I'll do it tomorrow. I'll do it tomorrow. Do you know what I mean? It's so much. It's so easy just to go. I'll sort that out tomorrow. I'll sort that out tomorrow.
I'll leave that. Yeah.
And I think that's what he's saying when he goes tomorrow and tomorrow and tomorrow.
Yeah.
Creeps forth this petty.
Yeah, and that's one of the
syllable.
things that I love about Shakespeare is the interpretation of it as well. Is that I took that as a place of procrastinating within whatever thought process that we're in right now. I took that speech.
Yeah. No, but also just the idea. It is a tale told by an idiot, full of sound and fury, and signifying nothing. It's like, wow, that kind of, and what 500 years ago. 500 years ago, before social media, before Twitter, before all of this stuff, before, all of the modern things that are supposed to cause us stress. You know, the excuses that we now have for being stressed, or the excuses we now give ourselves for whatever. You know, it's modern life is this or modern life is that, and you get all of these self-help gurus, talking about, stop procrastinating and whatever, because it's
because of your phone, or
clearly
because
not, it's never been any different 500 years ago, and you've got some bloke talking about how he just hasn't managed to achieve what he wants to achieve, or life's not worth whatever. It's never been any different. That's interesting, isn't it?
So on that note, there seems to be an actor within you as well.
An actor.
They're a performer. There seems to be one hiding away in there somewhere.
Yeah, I kind of like,
You've been a panto dame a few times.
Done a bit, I haven't performed for a while, actually. The last thing I was in was Beauty and the Beast, 2018, Christmas 2018. Is that the last thing I was in? Yeah. When I was the dame in Beauty and the Beast, I played panto villain quite a few times. Played dame. I started off when I first started doing panto villain. Then I reached an age. I don't know. You reach an age where you go, am I a dame? I still prefer. I think my favourite part was probably the mixture of both. Was probably the wicked stepmother in Cinderella.
Right.
When I played the wicked stepmother in Cinderella in 2016 at South Mill Arts. That's my favourite part. We kind of based her on the one out of what's the Roald Dahl musical?
Matilda. Yeah.
What's her Trunchbull?
Oh, Trunchbull.
Yeah. So we kind of like based a wicked stepmother on Trunchbull. But so I've done panto perform. So you a lot of panto, but anything more? Yeah,
more I did. Do I remember you being in Macbeth, or did you direct that?
No, I directed Macbeth. I directed a production of Macbeth at the Playhouse where we had cars driving around on stage.
Yeah, pulling up. Yeah.
I was Oberon in A Midsummer Night's Dream, the year before we did Romeo and Juliet, and I was in Romeo and Juliet. I was Montague, Romeo's dad. Shot with fairly small part, but yeah. So I was in that. So yeah, I have. Yeah, I do like performing. I haven't done for a while.
Do you think you might do? Do you have any aspirations?
I think. Yeah, there's a part of me that there is a part of me that goes, oh, go and get yourself an agent and become an actor. But then I've been in stuff that I've produced, and I find that difficult, and I don't think I'll ever do that again.
Right.
I kind of think that that's a bit of a step too far, and you have to be very secure in your environment. And when I was the artistic programmer at South Mill, it was easier because you've got a kind of greater control over everything. But when you're producing work and being in it, it is quite difficult. So I do enjoy the whole production process, and I enjoy directing. If I was going to be in something, I think I'd probably have to just go and try and be in something that wasn't anything to do with. Do you know what I mean? That was produced by someone else. Maybe I should.
Yeah. What about amateur dramatics? Like if there was if the Victoria Hall Theatre, they're putting on Macbeth. are you auditioning? Here's the question.
Would I audition? I suppose it would have to depend on when it was and what and what. Yeah, what the situation was, but I that's interesting actually, because I hadn't really thought about it. So, but I do miss it. I do miss it, but there's also a part of me that sort of doesn't. Yeah, that's like it's no help at all, is it? That statement.
When you say that, so like you feel fulfilled enough with all the other things that you're doing, that element of your life is okay to be on hold.
I don't. Yeah, I think it's to do with. Yeah, maybe. I don't know. I don't have any kind of. I don't feel as if I need to go out and act. Do you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. I think if I did, there's a part of me. I think it would be. I think I might be doing it for that affirmation thing, and that's not necessarily the right reason. Mm-hmm. To do it. I have a greater desire to kind of try and create things. I enjoy producing the panto. I enjoy working in the theatre school and creating stuff with the kids. Do you know what I mean? I quite like, I don't mind being on my feet in front of people. I quite like it when we do a production. I quite like standing up for a few minutes and talking about it at the beginning or whatever. Do you know what I mean? And having a chat with the parents and sort of introducing it. But I don't feel the need to sort of dress up as Hook and be in Peter Pan or anything.
No. There's not a burning desire to...
No. Unless, this conversation has somehow lit one and I'm now going to go away and feel frustrated.
or we'll take that. That could be your self-tape, that moment where you gave the Macbeth speech. We'll send that off to a few agencies.
I don't know. Was it any good, Martin? What did you think? Did I go overboard?
We'll see in the comments, won't we?
Oh my God. Yeah. So, yeah. No, it's it's where am I at? I'm in quite a good place at the moment. I think I've got sort of stuff happening, and I have taken up cold water therapy every morning.
Oh, right.
Which was something that you mentioned a while ago.
Oh, you've started that,
yes,
have you? Because I know you do open water swimming.
I do open water swimming.
And you get a lot of fulfillment from that, don't you?
Yeah. I love enjoyment. That. I love that. Maybe, hopefully once or twice a week, mostly just at Redricks Lake in Sawbridgeworth. But I have a little plunge pool thing, in my back garden. I've put my hot tub back in as well. I had a hot tub a while ago, and then I had to just get rid of it because the electricity bill went through the roof. I've put it back in. I made a decision. I'm going to foot the bill because I think it's worth it. It shocked me how much it cost just the first few days because I've got one of these smart meters. So I'm going to have to look at some sort of insulation process or work out how I can work it best. But so I do have a hot tub, but I've also got one just little plunge pool thing that sits on the patio, and And 10 minutes.
Are you up to 10 minutes already?
Yeah.
You're just diving straight in at the deep end.
Straight in at 10 minutes. I mean, it's difficult because you do this, don't you?
Yes, I do this.
How do you? What sort of temperature is yours at?
So mine's at, you fill it up with a cold water tap, and I refill it once a week.
Right. Yeah.
With that
same
water.
as what we're doing.
And then I've got about 5 or 6 ice cube trays.
Right.
That I chuck in it just before I go in.
I've got little mini water bottles. Mm-hmm. Little mini water bottles filled up with water in the freezer.
Yeah.
Chuck them in.
Yeah.
And then chuck a whole load of ice in. As
we're moving into winter now.
Well, it's going to get
colder.
What temperature? What have you got a thermometer?
Yes, I have got a thermometer.
What temperature
so
is
I'm getting it down to
it's
only about 20.
See,
that's not
Not that you can get in that for 10 minutes.
No, but it's cold enough to make a change.
Yeah.
It's cold enough to.
I can get mine down to 14.
Can you?
I can get mine down to 14. I can do 10 minutes at 14.
Yeah. That's good. That's
hands,
really good. Well, it's a benefit for me.
My hands hurt.
Well, yeah, but the long-term benefit, even at 20.
Yeah. It's cold. That's cold.
So I'm not saying I'm a superhero doing it like.
No, I feel good about the fact that you said yours is at 20 because I know I can get mine down. Only just recently, this morning, it was 14. Mm-hmm. It's been at about 16, 17, and difficult to get further down than that because of the temperature.
Yeah, I'd say so. No, sometimes I can get it down to about 17, but we've had a very warm couple of weeks, haven't we? And even with it sitting in the shade, it's still.
It's going to next 2 weeks.
It's going to start.
2 or 3 weeks going to start to go. I'm thinking, oh man, what's that going to be like when because you can come down and that'll be at like 12, 10 degrees centigrade. That's going to be a shock.
Yes, yeah. And that's why doing it now is good, because you're building up to it. So it's not, kind of what to expect. You're kind of taking it a step at a time.
Yeah.
But yeah, even at that temperature that I get it at now, the benefit I feel for the day, I almost can't live without it.
We went away the weekend because it was my mother-in-law's 80th birthday party. She lives up in Lincolnshire. So we went Thursday afternoon. So Friday, Saturday, Sunday, no plunge pool. Mm-hmm. I was not in a good place.
No.
I seriously missed it.
Because you notice the pain in your. I've suffered with pain in the joints in my hands before I discovered this, in my knees, and in my early 30s, I was thinking, I feel 60, 70 years old. Yeah. What the hell is wrong with me? And went to the doctors and they did numerous tests, found nothing wrong. But someone suggested this to me. I tried lots of other different remedies and things and nothing was working. But this has changed my body, how it feels daily. I feel awake in my body, relaxed in my body.
Yeah.
And I also feel more alert in my mind as well. I feel starting my day like that wakes me up.
Yeah, absolutely.
It gets my brain going. It gets me into a better state of being.
Yeah, it's good. No, I've been but I don't know, three or so weeks. As I said, I've been doing the cold water swimming for quite some time, but the idea, it was my future son-in-law, Lucy, her partner, Matt, as I said, they're living with us at the moment, and he bought it. He just ordered this plunge pool and stuck it on the patio.
So you're sharing one, are you?
I think I use it more than anybody else in the in the house, but we change the water every 5 or 6 days or whatever.
Yes, yeah.
But yeah, I think I'm the one that's kind of
reaping the benefits,
a bit
and
obsessed with it. Yeah.
No, they say as well that it's as addictive as cocaine. It's sending off this very similar thought. What do they call it? Like neutrons into the brain.
Right. Okay.
It's sparking the same areas of alertness.
There you go. That's why I missed it when I went to Lincolnshire.
Yeah. But if you feel different, for a simple thing like that, then why not?
Yeah,
why not
absolutely.
do it?
Yeah.
Yeah. Why not try it? And I try and I'm pleased you're doing it, because I tell a lot of people and they're like, no, can't do it, and they'd rather live with the aches and the pains.
Yeah.
Than go into some cold water.
No, it's it is. Well, I have rheumatoid arthritis. I'm on medication for it at the moment, and that comes and goes. Mm-hmm. That's the reason I got the hot tub back as well, because that is that's good for just chilling out. So what I'm trying to get into the pattern of is it's cold plunge, 10 minutes in the morning, hot tub, 15 minutes at night. That's my kind of process. But,
and at night time, the body warming up is also important, isn't it? To help you relax.
So yes,
good.
I am a water therapy man.
Yeah, good. And I also understand that you're a mental health practitioner. Is that right?
Is
that the right words?
I'm a mental health first aider. I have taken the Mental Health First Aid England course to be able to work as a mental health first aider. It's not something that's it's a recognised qualification. And in the same way that there's a legal obligation for businesses to have a trained medical first aider, there's legislation coming in now where businesses will be impelled to have someone who's a mental health first aider and is at least kind of up to date with various mental health conditions and whatever. This started with the theatre school about 5 or 6 years ago, actually. Just being aware of running a theatre school with young people, and just being aware of the shift in their mental health over the years. If you look back, say 20 years ago, when the theatre school was established at the Playhouse, I'd say that if you had a class of 24 children, say you had a class of 24 children aged between 12 and 16, about 20 years ago, you might assume that 16, 20 of those kids would be fairly rooted, fairly okay, whatever. You might expect 4 or 5 of them to have sort of issues that might require more than the normal attention. Do you know what I mean? Or might require a conversation every now and then, or whatever, or some sort of further investigation. I'd say now, 20 years later, that it shifted completely, and you get a group of 24 young people, and you'd expect 4 or 5 of them to be fairly solid and not have any issues, and the majority of them to be experiencing some form of anxiety or depression or some kind of identifiable mental health condition. And I think it really has changed that much, and I was aware of that, so I sought some funding, and we trained all of our tutors as mental health first aiders. And funny enough, that got me in touch with a chap I used to work with years ago in a state agency before I got involved in theatre, who now runs a mental health charity. And I've done some work with them, and just recently qualified as a mental health first aid trainer. So I now can run that course to train people to be mental health first aiders. And it's just something. It's something close to my heart because of I've had my own kind of mental health struggles in the past. As I said, my brother, when he was in his early 50s, took his own life back in 2016. And I just think it's something that we all need to be aware of, and that kind of, it's such a taboo thing for particularly men to talk about their mental health, and it has changed, and it is changing, and there's obviously a lot more openness, but it's still a massive issue.
Why do you think there's been such a shift?
Why has there been a shift? Because I think the media leads things nowadays, and I think that I think it's been easier for people to for certain people to express themselves. It becomes easier for everybody to see that expression, if that makes sense. Do you know what I mean? So I just think because it's interesting, isn't it? Because earlier on, I think that there are pressures in the modern world which cause more mental health issues, particularly with young people. But then earlier on, it was interesting. We were talking about, look at Shakespeare from 500 years ago, and there were still all of those issues bubbling on then. But I think that I think particularly with young people, there's a real, I think social media causes a real issue with regards to constantly feeling exposed, constantly feeling as if they're in the spotlight and constantly being looked at. Do you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And I think that happens in more ways than one. I have this theory that I call the school disco syndrome. And I think about when I was 13, 14 years old, I lived in a little village, and there used to be a disco once every month, and then maybe the village next door had a disco once every month. So there was a couple of Saturday night or Friday night discos that you could go to once or twice a month. And when you went to them, there was this heightened sense of reality because, nobody was in school uniform. So some people were dressed up as mods, and some were rockers, and some were teddy boys, and people you got together in this heightened sense of environment, and that was where, people got off with people, or people got dumped, or there were fights or whatever. And for 2-3 hours on a Saturday night, there was this real sense of everyone looking at each other, and people looking good, and girls being dressed up, and somebody who might you have thought was a bit of a plain Jane suddenly looked really glamorous or whatever, or you suddenly realised that some kid that you normally just saw in a school uniform was a teddy boy or whatever. Do you know what I mean? And there was this sort of heightened sense going on. But then when that disco finished, you went back to normality again, and you went back to school the next day, and you were back in your school uniforms, and it was all over. And that used to happen once or twice a month. And I think what social media does is it creates that heightened sense of reality 24/7. Do you know what I mean? I think they're constantly in a room looking at each other, and that's what mobile phones, and that's what social media and Snapchat and those kind of networks all do, is they force young people to be constantly assessing each other all the time. And I don't think there's any escape from it. And I think that impacts massively on mental health, because I don't think you can get away from constantly being observed. And I don't, and I think
comparing.
Yeah, anything you do can be observed, can be recorded, can be compared with someone else.
Yeah, for the feedback, we go back to the feedback thing again. You get the positive feedback with the likes. And you get the negative feedback where their friends say,
"Yeah, there we go."
Yeah.
We were talking about how you got to be so careful that you don't take things to heart. Yeah, here's this process that's constantly trying to go. I like it, and then of course, because by definition you can like something a lot, then something can not be liked a lot. Do you know what I mean? And you get that idea of a kid. Maybe somebody posts. I mean, I do the same thing. I'm 56 years old, and every now and then I'll post something on Facebook, and I'll go back to it 3 hours later, and there's no likes, and there is a part of me that feels a little bit lost. It's pathetic, isn't it? Do you know what I mean?
No, and I can admit to exactly the same thing. Yeah, especially when you put a bit of thought into it.
Not even one. But yeah. So you think, and then you take a. 56-year-old man, that can happen too. Take a 13-year-old girl.
Yes.
Take a 13-year-old child who's unsure about their sexuality or where they are, who posts something that they think is funny, and
no one laughs.
Or no one laughs, and someone posts a eyebrows raised emoji and says, what makes you think this is funny? Do you know what I mean?
Or they work a long time on what outfit they're going to wear that day and share the outfit, and then
I think that's an issue, and I think it's something that people need to be aware of. I think a lot of adults aren't aware of. The kind of things that I've from having conversations with young people, like Snapchat streams or whatever. This idea that they have to have a conversation with somebody every day.
Every day, yes, yeah.
And I've got kids saying,
Can't miss out on this conversation.
Can't miss out because I've got it's over 1,000.
Mm-hmm.
That's 2.5 years.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
So what advice would you give to any? I was going to say young people, but I think this is relevant to everyone right now to navigate this world. In general, the whole world, Phil, the whole world. How do we navigate it?
What advice would you give to anyone to navigate this world?
Yeah.
Well,
let's stick with the social media and mental health.
I think talking is just. I think the key thing is just trying to talk. It's just trying to. You've got to keep communicating, trying to stay in the present and talking about how people are and what they're thinking and how are you. Do you know what I mean? And be interested in how people are. The 2-question thing. How are you? Okay. Are you sure? Do you know what I mean? That idea of like when you ask somebody how they are, ensure that you mean to ask them how they are and ensure that their answer is correct, because it's very easy to say to somebody, how are you? I'm okay. Good. I asked you. You said you're okay. Because that's the response you normally get. Do you know what I mean? I had a friend, my friend Richard, who works for this company. I mean, he did that to me the other day. There was something on my mind and and I hadn't spoken to him for a while and he went, how you doing? And I went, yeah, I'm all right. And he could have moved on. Do you know what I mean? But he went, yeah, I'm all right. Sounds like you're not. Do you know what I mean? And I went, well, yeah. And then a conversation started. Do you know what I mean? And we were off. And you can have conversations. And I think, it's such a difficult thing. But I think, being genuinely interested in how somebody is and having conversations with them, and being aware of what sort of places there are to help people, so you can signpost people in the right direction if they need assistance. Because there are a lot of places that
you might not always be the best person to get. You might be good for listening, but you might not necessarily be the best person for the advice.
Yeah, absolutely. And being a mental health first aider isn't about giving mental health advice. Mm-hmm. It's about pointing people in the right direction to get that qualified advice. I don't claim to be a qualified mental health nurse or whatever. I wouldn't claim to be that, but I am kind of trained in being able to point people in the right direction and say, well, there's places here you could go to, or have you tried calling that, or at least have you ever thought about speaking to other people about it? Just trying to encourage people to talk. Mm-hmm. I think that's the key thing. And just looking after. I think the other thing that you have to do in this environment, which is what they call the oxygen mask analogy. That idea that when you get on a plane and they do the safety talk, they always say, if an oxygen mask falls down, put your own one on before you help anybody else. It's a really simple analogy, and it seems really obvious, but when you think about it in terms of self-care, I think it's really important to look after yourself, because if you can look after yourself, then you're going to be in a much better position to help other people. And that's where, cold plunging every morning comes in. Yeah,
exactly. I think this is before we wrap this up, this is the one last thing I wanted to talk to you about. This whole thing about having a conversation and the value within these conversations for each other. And how the value to our lives that the conversations can bring out is one of the reasons why I'm doing this. Yeah, for me. Yeah. But I've seen you're also doing a podcast.
I am. Yes.
Which I've listened to the first 2 episodes and really enjoyed.
Yeah. Good. Spread Your Wings and Fly, which is it's a podcast. The idea being that that I speak to former members of the Phoenix Theatre School, who are now working professionally in the industry. And we have a conversation about how they transitioned, how they managed to make that move from being a student into working professionally in the industry. We have a little bit of a conversation about what their favourite piece of theatre they've ever seen is, and a conversation around what favourite memories they have of being a student at Phoenix. But it was really driven by the fact that I was aware when I'm working with kids in the theatre school, so many of them, when they get to that sort of 17, 18 age, it's often an interest in performing arts stops at that point. Do you know what I mean? Because they then start to make what they perceive to be decisions about their careers, and if they don't see a way of being able to carry on potentially performing arts as a career, then that can all stop. And I thought, well, we've got so many people have made that transition. Why don't I start to talk to them? And hopefully the idea is that we build up a kind of database of interviews that you can go to. And I think the interesting thing is, there won't be one message that comes out, because there's so many different routes through, from the age of 16,
That's
17.
What I got from the first two episodes, was listening to, I think, Michael Fentiman and then Tom Brace,
the magician.
Yeah, and the way that they've both taken completely separate different routes in the entertainment business. But the way they took them routes were completely different as well, weren't they?
And the third episode is out now. Kaylee McKnight, who was a musical theatre student, and she was one of the lead vocalists on Hugh Jackman's world tour. Played stadiums all over the world. Just about to go into 6 in the West End, and her journey is really interesting as well. And she talks about the whole idea of persistence, and she talks about the necessity to keep your own self-confidence and whatever. So I think there's lots of invaluable advice from people that have lived it, and I'm hoping that I can just keep going with that. I'm not trying to rush it. I'm not like you. I mean, you're pushing out podcasts like they're going out of fashion. I don't know how you find the time, but literally just trying to one episode a month. So I've got. Episode 4 is in the can and it just needs to be edited, and that is Abigail Carter-Simpson, who was semi-finalist on Britain's Got Talent this year, and was a former Phoenix student, played Peter Pan in a production of Peter Pan that I did, and now is a stand-up comedian and a teacher, and kind of balancing a normal career alongside a performing arts career. So another insight into how how you can get on. I think that's
lovely. I would recommend anyone interested in joining the industry have a listen to your podcast.
Fantastic.
Very very informative. I wish you all the best with that.
Thank you very
much. Last question. Any hopes and dreams for the future?
Hopes and dreams for the future. Just stay alive and enjoy life. Stay alive and enjoy life. That's my hope and dream for the future. I've got two grandchildren, and I've got a third one on the way. So Katie, my eldest daughter's got 2 little boys. Louis is 5 and Alfie is 2. And now Lucy is due in January, and she's had the scan, and she knows it's going to be a boy. So it's 3 boys now. So trying to get a football team together by the sounds of it. So, but that's really just having grandchildren's really kind of shifted my perspective on things, and you kind of just get you just have to be hopeful. You have to be, because you've got there's little kids in the world. If you can't be hopeful, then what's the point?
Yeah.
So just be hopeful, enjoy life, and one day we'll all die.
On that note, thank you for joining me this morning, Phil.
Thank you very much indeed.
I appreciate your time.
Cheers. Thank you.
Thank you. We're all gonna die. What a beautiful way to end it. Lovely. That was the BTS Creative Academy Podcast, Uncut. I appreciate you joining us for this conversation. If you'd like to drop into more conversations, just search the BTS Creative Academy Podcast, wherever you get your podcasts. And to make sure you don't miss any future episodes, don't forget to like and subscribe.